Cordelia lay in bed long after the oil lamp flame had guttered out, her mind a whirlpool of conflicting thoughts. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines surrounding Blackthorn's general store, as if urging her to make a choice before dawn's first light. She replayed her conversation with Papa over and over, his word of caution echoing in her heart. If a man only values you because no one else is looking, then he doesn't value you at all. Below her, the household settled into the hush of night. The soft creak of floorboards in the barn, the low murmur of Jake's voice drifting in from the stable. Each sound reminded her that the ranch was already stirring, preparing for another day that would shape her future irrevocably. She pressed a hand to her temples, trying to still the storm of emotions. Doubt. Had she asked too much of Nathaniel? Hope. Could love truly bridge the chasm between a wealthy rancher's world and a spinster's humble origins? Fear. What if her father was right? What if Nathaniel's proposal, born from necessity, lacked the bedrock of true feeling? And guilt. For the first time in her life, she felt guilty about daring to want something more. By the time the first ray of sunlight filtered through her curtains, Cordelia had resolved to face the day with clarity. She dressed in the simple grey dress she had worn to church the Sunday before, the one Papa had helped her mend last autumn. The fabric felt heavy, the colour sombre, an apt reflection of her mood. She took down her hair into a neat braid, deliberately, omitting the small flower pin she had considered wearing, reminded that there was no room for frivolous embellishment in the decisions ahead. Stepping outside, Cordelia inhaled the crisp morning air. The scent of sagebrush and dew-soaked earth filled her lungs, awakening her senses. As she crossed the wooden boardwalk to the store, the town seemed eerily still. Shop windows remained darkened. Even the usually chatty Mrs. Patterson was nowhere in sight. Word of the previous day's events had spread like wildfire. Today, every pair of eyes would be upon her. Papa was tending the small flock of chickens in the backyard, his face drawn and pale from lack of sleep. He acknowledged her with a faint nod. She returned it with a tight-lipped smile. No words passed between them. Each knew the weight that hung over Cedar Ridge. "Morning, Papa," she said quietly when she reached him. "Morning, Cordelia," he replied, his voice hoarse. He pecked at the ground, scattering feed. "I'm glad to see you up." She watched him, noticing for the first time how close his shoulders seemed to slope toward the ground. "Thank you for staying here last night," she replied. "I couldn't have faced this without you." His gaze flicked toward the store's front windows, where several townspeople had gathered on the boardwalk, speaking in hushed tones. "They'll be here soon," he said, voice grim. "We need to open early." Cordelia nodded. She straightened her posture as though preparing for battle. She and Papa had agreed. She would go to the ranch in the morning, deliver her answer to Nathaniel, and then return to Cedar Ridge to face whatever the town might hurl at them. Inside the store, Cordelia settled behind the counter, her fingers fidgeting with a stray piece of chalk. Papa unlocked the front door and slid aside the bolt. As the bell tinkled, the first customers hesitated, glancing at Cordelia's resolute face. Mrs. Patterson was first to speak. "Miss Blackthorn," she began, voice clipped, "we heard what happened. We just wanted to—" Papa cleared his throat. "Cordelia is attending to urgent matters this morning." Mrs. Patterson's thin lips pursed. She nodded once, and without another word, turned on her heel and left. One by one, others came. Mr. Harris, the petty landlord, muttering about propriety. Young Nancy Morgan, eyes wide with curiosity. Old Mr. Jenkins, lifting his hat in a tentative greeting. Each left with Cordelia's polite nod and Papa's silent support. But Cordelia's attention remained on the boardwalk outside, where a small, grim procession was forming. Sheriff Coleman, his badge gleaming in the pale sun. Henry Farweather, his jaw set in rigid disapproval. Dr. Henley, arms crossed, spine ramrod straight, and behind them a throng of townspeople, Magnolia Fairweather among them, her lips pursed and eyes glittering with triumph. "Ready, lass?" Papa asked softly. Cordelia took a deep breath. "Ready." They exited the store, stepping into the crush of expectant faces. The murmurs swelled as they approached the edge of the crowd. Cordelia's cheeks burned, but she held her head high. Not even Papa's hand on her shoulder could steady the quiver in her limbs. Sheriff Coleman raised his hand. "Cordelia Blackthorne," he announced, his voice booming in the silent morning. "Nathaniel Steele has requested your answer regarding his marriage proposal." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Cordelia pressed her lips together to prevent a quaver. She glanced at Henry Fairweather, whose expression was an unreadable mask of concern and disdain. "My answer is yes," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. For a heartbeat the world held its breath. Then Henry Fairweather's face contorted. "Yes," he shouted. "You agree to—" "My answer is yes," she repeated, turning to meet his glare. With unwavering calm, "I will marry Nathaniel Steele." A startled hush fell over the crowd. Magnolia gasped, covering her mouth. Dr. Henley's brow wrinkled. Mr. Jenkins mumbled, "Well, I'll be damned." Sheriff Coleman glanced at the others, then nodded. "Very well. Mr. Steele will be notified." He lifted his hat and strode back toward the ranch. Cordelia felt as though the new day's sun burned hotly against her skin, marking the moment when her life would be changed forever. "Papa, thank you," she whispered, clutching his hand. He squeezed her fingers before releasing them, pride and worry intertwining in his eyes. Up on the hill where the ranch house rose above the timberline, Nathaniel waited with Lincoln, the foreman, pacing at his side. Nathaniel's grey eyes were grim, lips set in a thin line. His coat hung neatly from his shoulders, his hat removed in respect for the morning ceremony. When the sheriff arrived, he nodded curtly. "She said yes." Nathaniel exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, his shoulders sagging momentarily at the relief flooding through him. Then he squared his spine, pushing back the memories of the past 3 years. Sarah's laughter, Victoria's betrayal, his own self-imposed exile. Cordelia's yes was a lifeline to a future he dared to believe in. "Thank you, Sheriff," he said quietly. Sheriff Coleman tipped his hat. "Congratulations, Mr. Steele. The town will no doubt have more to say before the week is out, but word is already spreading. The wedding will be the talk of the territory." Nathaniel nodded. "Then we will ensure it's a story of respect and honor, not scandal and rumor." The sheriff mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Nathaniel standing in the crisp morning air with Lincoln and a small group of ranch hands gathering at attention. "Wagons ready, sir," Lincoln said. "When you're prepared." Nathaniel took one final look toward Cedar Ridge, its dusty main street winding between rows of modest wooden buildings. He pictured Cordelia's resolute figure, the pride in her eyes, the tremor he had caught when she'd spoken her answer. He touched his hat to his chest. "Let us begin." Back in Cedar Ridge, Cordelia returned to the store only long enough to gather a simple traveling chest, a spare dress, linens, and a few cherished possessions. Her mother's butterfly brooch, her best pair of reading glasses, and a slender volume of Keats that had accompanied her since girlhood. Papa packed a leather satchel with money for emergencies and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Be careful, my girl," he said. "Your path is set, but the terrain is unforgiving. Always trust in yourself. You carry my heart with you." Tears pricked at Cordelia's eyes, but she smiled. "And I carry yours." Outside, Melbourne's stagecoach had been pressed into service as a makeshift carriage. Cordelia climbed into the back, taking a last look at the place that had shaped her dreams and insecurities alike. She spotted Magnolia at the boardwalk's end, arms folded and lips in a tight line, Lady Fairweather's disdain etched into every motion. In that moment, Cordelia felt a flicker of defiance. To live by other people's judgments was to surrender one's soul. The coach rattled to life, and as it climbed the gentle rise toward the ranch, she stared out the window at Montana's vast expanse. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she were on the cusp of becoming someone new, not Cordelia the spinster, but Cordelia the bride, the partner, the woman who had dared to choose. Yet as the silhouette of the ranch house grew against the morning horizon, the weight of what awaited her pressed down. Would the townspeople accept her? Could she stand unwavering beside Nathaniel when rumors festered behind closed doors? And most pressing of all, did she truly know what it meant to be married to a man with his past, his secrets, and his formidable estate? She set aside her doubts. Love had brought her to this precipice. She would take the leap, believing that, beneath the fear, there lay something worth fighting for. At the lodge, Mrs. Carmichael greeted Cordelia with gentle hospitality, helping her smooth the folds of her modest traveling dress. "Mr. Steele awaits you in the parlor," she said in a soft tone. "He was nervous to speak with you." "Thank you, Mrs. Carmichael," Cordelia replied, smoothing her hair back into a simple bun. "For everything." Mrs. Carmichael's eyes shone. "I believe happiness awaits you, miss." The parlor doors opened to reveal Nathaniel standing by the window, gazing out at the penned cattle below. He turned as she entered, and in his eyes she saw relief, admiration, and an emotion so tender it made her breath catch. Nathaniel bowed his head slightly. "Cordelia." She curtsied. The motion she had practiced countless times as a girl, when the idea of being addressed as Miss had felt heavy with expectation. Now it felt as though each step brought her closer to a life she had never dared to imagine. "Nathaniel," she replied, "thank you for this morning." He stepped forward, carefully taking one of her gloved hands in his. The parlor felt intimate, every piece of furniture a reminder of the life he had built in seclusion, a life he was willing to share with her. "I owe you gratitude beyond words," he said softly. "You made a choice that many believed you lacked the right to make, but you chose to trust me, and I will not betray that trust." A warmth bloomed in her chest as she met his gaze. "Then I know we shall stand firm. Together." He pressed a kiss to her gloved knuckles. "Together," he echoed. Later that afternoon, after a modest luncheon provided by Mrs. Carmichael, Nathaniel escorted Cordelia into his office, formerly his study's quiet corner, and closed the door behind them. He retrieved a worn leather binder from a shelf. "This," he said, handing it to her, "contains my private ledgers and the correspondence outlining the final terms of Victoria Ashford's divorce settlement. I trust you've never read such documents out of curiosity before, so I'd rather you see them now than face question by question in the town square." Cordelia took the binder, noting the fine, cursive scrawls on yellowed pages. She lifted the cover to discover addendums of property divisions, clauses specifying that Victoria was barred from certain claims on his estate, and the legal grounds on which he had refuted her blackmail attempts. The final pages were a statement from the San Francisco attorney, certifying that the divorce was granted on grounds of fraud, and that Victoria was limited to a modest alimony for a fixed period, nothing more. "I want you to know the full truth," Nathaniel continued. "No half measures. If you stand beside me, I want there to be no shadows between us." A lump rose in Cordelia's throat as she read the evidence of betrayals. Victoria's meticulous plotting, Sarah's tragic demise, and Nathaniel's long struggle to protect his name. Fury and sorrow mingled within her. But as she looked at him, standing vulnerable in his shirt sleeves, she saw a man unburdening himself for her sake. "I do stand beside you," she said, her voice soft but unshakable. "I will face whatever comes." He nodded, relief flooding his features. Then let us go forward without fear. Outside, a cloud of dust rose as a rider approached at full gallop. Cordelia's heart skipped, Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "Open the door, please," Mrs. Carmichael obliged, albeit nervously. The rider dismounted with the urgency of bad news. "Mr. Steele, Miss Blackthorne." It was Lincoln, his face ashen. "There's trouble in the east pasture. A calf's gone missing, and the fence at the north corral's been torn down. But worse. I heard from Jackson that a wagon train bound for Helena was waylaid overnight. It might be rustlers." Nathaniel's eyes hardened. "We have about 15 head on that wagon train. If the rustlers got to them, they could round up more cattle. They'll test the fence lines next, or even try to take horses. We need to ride." "Out now. I'll take Miss Blackthorne with me if you're willing." Cordelia's pulse thundered. Ranch life's dangers were real, and now she was being asked to step into them fully. But she found herself nodding. "I'm coming." In moments, they rode out together beneath the vast Montana sky, the golden sun hanging low on the horizon. Bram, the head wrangler, led the way to the east pasture, where the fence posts lay broken and the gate had been yanked off its hinges. Nathaniel dismounted, striding to inspect the damage. Cordelia followed, her heart hammering not from fear of rustlers, but from the realization that she had stepped so completely into Nathaniel's world that she could not retreat. They moved fast, Nathaniel muttered, running a gloved hand over the splintered wood. "I'll have to gather the hands and repair this immediately, then we'll track them on horseback." Cordelia knelt to examine the hoofprints in the soft earth, fresh, carrying a scent of sweat and narrowly crushed sagebrush. They went east, toward the Timber Creek draw. Nathaniel met her gaze, a flash of respect sparking in his gray eyes. "You have an eye for detail." She rose, meeting him evenly. "I've spent my life observing carefully." He nodded, then walked her back to the horses. "I'll ride with Bram to repair the fence. You return to the house, Miss Blackthorne. There's work to be done there, arranging the west corridor's shelves." The command stung like a rebuke. Cordelia straightened. She had volunteered to ride, to be part of this life. She refused to be relegated to mere domesticity, even for a moment. "Sir," she said, voice steady, "if I'm married to you, I should share in these challenges. Let me help." Nathaniel's stern facade softened. He studied her unflinching gaze, the resolve etched in her features. Finally he exhaled. "Very well, take Jake's reins. Support Bram in the repairs. Then we'll ride together to pursue those rustlers." Cordelia's heart soared. She leapt onto Jake's horse as he handed her the reins, determination alight in her grey eyes. As the sun sank behind the distant peaks, she realized that she was no longer merely an observer in Nathaniel's world. She was a partner, ready to stand beside him in danger and defiance of a society that doubted her worth. And in that moment, as the wind whipped across the plains and the first stars pricked the twilight sky, Cordelia understood that her choice was no longer about marriage as a convenient solution. This was about forging a life of genuine partnership, a life where each shared the burdens, dangers, and triumphs awaiting them beyond Cedar Ridge's narrow confines. Tomorrow, they would face the rustlers and the fence menders. But tonight, as they worked shoulder to shoulder beneath Montana's vast skies, Cordelia felt a fierce joy. For the first time, she was exactly where she belonged. End of Part 1. The clang of hammer on wood echoed across the wide plains as Cordelia knelt beside Bram, driving a freshly hewn post into the soft, loamy earth. The sun was still low, casting long golden rays that caught the swirling dust raised by the ranch. Hands as they worked. Each spike she pounded home felt like a declaration of intent. She was no longer Cordelia Blackthorne, the spinster bound by her father's modest general store. She was becoming Cordelia Steele. Above her, the fence rail lay splintered, a reminder of how fragile boundaries could be. Bram wiped sweat from his brow and glanced her way. His lined face was curious, respectful. "You're a quick learner," he said, his voice carrying the faint drawl of men who'd spent lifetimes on horseback. "Ain't often a new bride." Cordelia straightened, gathering her skirts out of the mud. "Not a bride yet," she corrected, her tone light, though her heart thudded at the thought of their marriage still pending formally. "And I'd rather be solving problems than sitting in a parlor," Bram chuckled, then tipped his hat. "Fair enough, Miss Cordelia, but the work's heavy, and it doesn't take kindly to soft hands." She tapped the wooden post with the butt of her hammer, measuring the alignment. "Then let it toughen. I have work to do." By the time the fence was repaired, the sun had climbed higher, burning away the morning chill. Nathaniel rode up on his black stallion, his grey eyes assessing the finished work with a flick of satisfaction. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms taut with muscle. He dismounted, careful to keep his distance, yet close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. "Well done," he said, voice low, standing beside her until she looked up. "We found the rustler tracks heading north. I'm glad you're here." A ripple of pride warmed her chest. "I'm glad too." Nathaniel offered a curt nod, then turned to Bram. "Prep 2 horses each. We ride for Timber Creek in 30 minutes. Take Cordelia with you, Bram. You'll lead the way. I'll circle south with a small group to flank them." Cordelia mounted the chestnut that Bram held steady, the horse snorting. Softly, the animal's warmth seeped through her cedar-scented gloves, reminding her she was not an idle plaything, but a member of this working life now. She felt Bram's steady grip guide her stirrup, and then they were moving across the rolling prairie toward the draws east of the ranch. As they rode, Cordelia tried to push aside the doubts her father had voiced the day before. She clung to Nathaniel's earlier words. "I was watching you long before I had reason. Your dignity, even among scorn, stirred something in me." Still, the rustlers loomed far more pressing than social reputation. If they succeeded in stealing cattle, the ranch's prosperity, and by extension her future, would be at stake. They reached the gully where the fence had been torn down. Bram dismounted first and pointed toward the dry creek bed. "Tracks headed this way, barely traces, but fresh." Nathaniel swung down beside Cordelia. "Stay close to Bram, keep low, and follow his lead." Cordelia nodded, mounting a second horse Bram had saddled for her. The horse was smaller than the chestnut she'd had. Earlier, a lean quarter-horse with a calm disposition. As she settled into the saddle, she felt Nathaniel's eyes on her, concern shading his gaze. "Be careful," he said quietly, his voice a whisper she felt more than heard. "If things go sideways, don't hesitate to head back for help." She squared her shoulders with a resolute smile. "I'll hold my own." He inclined his head, and Bram limped one hand toward the northwestern draw. "This way," he said. The three of them threaded through the rough brush lining the creek, hoofbeats muffled on the dry dirt. Twice, Cordelia wiped sweat from her brow, her cheeks flushed from exertion and adrenaline. The prairie stretched endlessly on either side, rolling hills of sage and grass that swayed like a restless sea in the breeze. Yet the sunlight did not feel warm today. It felt like an interrogation, illuminating how far she had stepped from the security of Cedar Ridge. They reached a low, rocky outcropping, and Bram signaled them to halt. Below, a small clearing surrounded by a ring of junipers held the remnants of a makeshift corral. The earth was churned, hoofprints overlapping in frantic patterns. A single calf, terrified and skittish, bleated from where it huddled by a felled post. "They left in a hurry," Bram muttered, scanning the tracks beyond the clearing. "Looks like 2 horses, maybe 3. They took the rest south through Timber Creek." Nathaniel leaned forward, his jaw set. He guided his horse to the edge of the clearing, eyes narrowing. "Don't spook the calf, Cordelia. Stall her here. I'll be back to get her once we've sorted this." Cordelia nodded, dropping to the ground as Bram loosened the cinch. The calf stared at her with wide, frightened eyes, nostrils flaring. She knelt and reached a hand toward it, feeling its muscles tremble beneath its matted hide. "It's all right," she murmured, voice gentle and low. "I won't hurt you." Slowly, the calf inched forward, crowding against her body. She felt its rapid heartbeat and breathed softly, recalling her father's stories of the land's rhythms. Animals, like people, responded to kindness. She stayed with it, every nerve alive, aware that beyond the creek bed danger lurked. Behind her, Nathaniel and Bram slid into the shadows of the juniper ring, their figures half hidden. She caught glimpses of their horses bobbing behind rocky ledges, hear the low murmur of their conversation as they planned the next move. Time seemed to stretch interminably until Nathaniel appeared at her side. He dismounted and crouched near the calf, his posture protective. "I'll take her to the corral. Make sure you get out of sight swiftly. The rustlers know this land better than we do. We can't risk them spotting you." Cordelia's heart clenched, torn between fulfilling her role and trusting Nathaniel's command. She rose, lifting the calf with surprising ease for one so slight. Nathaniel guided her to a narrow path carved into the hillside where they could hide. She followed, using the calf as a screen until they were safely obscured. Then she watched. Nathaniel and Bram circle the clearing, searching for signs of the rustlers. In the dimming light as the sun neared the western horizon, the junipers cast shifting shadows that danced across the ground. Cordelia hugged the calf, whispering soothing words as the distant echoes of hoofbeats and low shouts drifted back. Minutes later, Nathaniel emerged from the thicket, his hat bristling with sage twigs, face streaked with sweat and dust. He looked older than her memory of him, taut as a cord wound tight around a ravine's edge. "They got away," he said, voice heavy with frustration. "Too fast." Bram saw them cross the ridge to the north, heading toward Timber Creek proper. "We'll need to cover ground quickly or they'll disappear." Cordelia swallowed. "What about the fence? I fixed that. Everything else is secure." He stared at her, admiration flickering in his eyes before he turned back. "Thank you. Now we must ride faster. Get the calf to the corral and ride for the house. Send reinforcements. Go!" Her chest tightened, torn between her longing to stand by him and the urgent need to protect the ranch. She nodded, cradling the calf as she slipped from the narrow path and headed down toward the constructed corral. Bram and the others had prepared. The calf bleated again, tiny and desperate, and she promised it a safer place. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and Bram spurred their horses into a gallop, racing across the plateau toward Timber Creek's mouth. The sky had become a wash of lavender and rose, summarizing the day's turmoil. Cordelia, with the calf secured behind the corral's gate, dipped into the saddle with her legs quivering. Each movement was a reminder of how far she had come from her father's general store, how fully she'd embraced this ranch's harsh rhythms. As she urged her horse down the winding trail toward the main house, she glanced upward to see the ridge behind her, a jagged blanket of rock and sage that sheltered dangers known only to the land's old inhabitants. The wind carried her father's voice. "Trust your instincts, Cordelia. Whatever comes, face it true." She clung to those words as her horse cantered through the sage. By the time she reached the barnyard, dust was settling and the ranch hands were forming search parties. Her heart pounded as she relayed the rustler trail's direction. "North toward the timbered creek bed," she said. "They didn't stay to fleece anymore. They're only interested in cattle." Nathaniel arrived minutes later, sides heaving with exertion, eyes ablaze. "Gather the men," he said. "I'll ride with Bram on the North Pass. Cordelia, you stay here unless I send for you." Cordelia met his gaze evenly and shook her head. "No, I'm coming. I can help." He hesitated, torn. The sun, almost fully set now, cast a blood-red glow over him. "It's too dangerous." Anger flared within her. So, was being in your parlor when I said I'd stand by you. You chose me. Now let me choose to stand by you." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He looked ready to argue, but then the distant crack of rifle fire echoed from Timber Creek. His face hardened. "Fine, but you stay out of the front, understand? Keep yourselves downwind, and if you see me fall, return to camp. Immediately." Cordelia nodded, and together they mounted horses. Bram joined them with 2 ranch hands, each armed with Winchester rifles. Above them, the first stars of night peeked through a sliver of indigo sky. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of pine sap and wild thyme. The ride north was tense, every hoofbeat a pledge of solidarity and risk. They reached the wooded draw, where the rustlers had marched the stolen cattle. The herd was chaotic, bellows and panicked hoofbeats shaking the darkness. Shadows flickered among the trees as torches cast uneven light. Nathaniel raised his hand. "Wait for my signal." In the hush that followed, Cordelia's pulse thundered in her ears. The moment stretched as infinite possibility. If the rustlers spotted them, they would draw fire. She swallowed, fingers tightening on her Winchester's stock. Then a single whistle split the air, their agreed-upon signal. Nathaniel rose in his stirrups and fired, a single shot in the air. Instantly chaos erupted. Bram's men charged from one side, Nathaniel and Cordelia from the other. Flashing torches revealed startled rustlers scrambling to control their herd. Cordelia fired twice, aiming at a horse's flank to send it skittering and unseat its rider. The animal bolted, its owner crashing into the underbrush below. She urged, her mount forward, riding alongside Nathaniel as he dismounted to secure an escaped calf. Bram and the others shouted orders, corralling the frightened herd back under control. One of the rustlers, lean, sun-scorched, turned to face her, rifle leveled. Cordelia's heart lurched. She felt every muscle tense as he took aim. Before he could squeeze the trigger, Nathaniel's rifle barked. The bullet struck its mark, cracking the rustler's gunstock in 2 and sending him sprawling. Silence fell, punctuated by the rustle of panicked cattle. Cordelia exhaled, but there was no time to savor the relief. One rustler slipped from behind, a fallen log, brandishing a knife. He surged toward Nathaniel, eyes alight with malicious intent. Cordelia charged, her heart hammering. She raised the Winchester, aiming not to kill, but to wound. The muzzle flash illuminated her face, fierce and determined. The rustler's shoulders jerked as the bullet tore through his coat. He collapsed with a groan, releasing Nathaniel from his grasp. Nathaniel twisted, rescuing the trapped calf with brutal efficiency, then met her gaze. His grim expression said more than words could. "You saved me." "Onward," he barked. "Secure the cattle." Within minutes, the herd was rounded up into the existing fence Bram and the men had quickly erected. The surviving rustlers, seeing their prize, recaptured, retreated deeper into the trees, moving like ghosts into the night. Nathaniel gathered his men, counting heads, ensuring no calf was unaccounted for. Cordelia knelt beside a trembling calf, checking for wounds, murmuring soothing words. He strode over, his gait steady despite the day's exertions. "Is she all right?" he asked, nodding toward the animal. Cordelia brushed a hand over its warm flank. "A scratch, nothing more. It'll heal." He studied her, concern and admiration warring within his gray eyes. "You fought well, better than some ranch hands I know." She looked away, cheeks flushing. "I just did what had to be done." He smiled, a slow curve that warmed her soul. "Good." Then his expression darkened. "We should return to the house. The men will need to finish securing the perimeter. You need rest." Cordelia hesitated. The thrill of action pulsed through her veins, and she felt more alive than she ever had in her father's shop. But exhaustion pulled at her limbs. She nodded, allowing Bram to lead her horse back toward the distant glow of lanterns at the ranch house. Inside, the grand hallway of the steel ranch felt cavernous, lit by lamps that cast soft circles of light on polished oak floors. Mrs. Carmichael and Jake had prepared a simple supper: roasted venison, barley bread, and a bowl of tepid stew. Cordelia slumped into a chair, the domestic rituals both comforting and surreal after facing down rustlers. Nathaniel joined her soon afterward, removing his jacket and loosening his tie. His hair was damp with sweat, eyes ringed with weariness. He poured her a cup of steaming broth and pressed it into her hands. "Drink this. You've earned it." Cordelia wrapped her fingers around the warm crock. As she sipped, she felt the liquid soothe her burning throat. She dared to meet his gaze, searching for hidden concern. Instead, she found something unguarded, a vulnerability she had only glimpsed once before in the study. "I didn't expect the chase to be so intense," she admitted, voice soft. He exhaled and sank onto the adjacent chair, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I didn't either. I hoped they'd scatter once they realized we were coming. But desperation drives men to dangerous acts." Cordelia considered the line of ragged footprints etched into her mind, the rifle's recoil in her grip, the rustler's snarl as he lunged. She shuddered at the memory. "Papa would have been furious to hear how I threw myself into this," she said wryly. "He fears for my safety, especially now that I'm betrothed to you." Nathaniel's lips quirked. "What did he say when you told him?" She nodded toward the hallway door. "He thinks I made a mistake. He's worried our marriage is more practical than passionate, that I'm solving a problem rather than following my heart." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, gaze dropping. "He may not be wrong, but my heart, my mind, both led me to you. Not because you solve problems, though you're better than most at that, but because I see you." Cordelia's breath caught. The blend of exhaustion and exhilaration made her dizzy. "Nathaniel," he tilted her chin up, his thumb brushing her cheek, "you're not just another solution. You're my partner in everything." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow but from the sudden surge of belonging. She slid from her chair and dropped to her knees before him, clasping his hand. "I believe you. I want to believe you, but tomorrow we'll face more than rustlers. We'll face the townspeople again, and Papa." Nathaniel rose, lifting her gently to her feet. He wrapped her in a hug so tight it infused her with courage. "Then we face them together. But tonight I want to show you another side of this life. Meet me outside." He parted the curtains, revealing a patio that overlooked the ranch's central corral. Beyond, the night was lit by 1,000,000,000 stars, a universe laid out just for them. The scents of pine, horse, and wood smoke mingled in the cool air. "What is this?" Cordelia whispered. Nathaniel turned to a weathered table where a simple spread awaited: crusty bread, cheese, dried venison, and a flask of dark whiskey. A rancher's supper, no finery but honest and good. He poured 2 glasses, offering one to her. As they sipped, he spoke softly of his early days on the land, how he'd stolen scrap metal to fashion windmills, how he'd gone hungry to pay a hired hand, how each sunrise had held both promise and dread. Cordelia listened, each confession another thread binding them closer. She, in turn, spoke of her father's store, the heartbreak of being deemed unmarriageable, the sense of aimlessness before Nathaniel's offer. When she finished, he reached out to brush a stray lock from her face. "You carry burdens, Cordelia. You've carried them well, but you don't have to carry them alone anymore." She lifted her glass in a silent toast and leaned into his warmth. "To the burdens, the dawn after the boardwalk celebration felt surreal. Cordelia awoke before the sun rose, lingering in the gentle darkness as her thoughts settled like dust in still air. The events of yesterday, her public acceptance of Nathaniel's marriage, proposal, the town's hushed awe and grudging respect, replayed in her mind like a fragile dream. She closed her eyes, savoring the memory of Nathaniel's steady gaze and Papa's proud, tear-filled expression. But there was no time to linger. Today marked the beginning of her life anew, and there were tasks to undertake. She dressed quickly in a simple, high-necked white muslin gown commissioned from Mrs. Jenkins's modest seamstress shop. The fabric, soft and spangling faintly in the dawn's first rays. Her hair, unbound since she'd left Cedar Ridge, she braided and coiled into a loose chignon, fastening a single white ribbon, a token of her new beginnings, at its base. She studied herself in the mirror, noting how the gown's elegance had transformed her silhouette, no longer merely a shopkeeper's daughter, but a bride-to-be, standing at the brink of an unknown future. Below, in the breakfast parlour, Papa sat at the polished pine table, head bent over a steaming mug of coffee. His shoulders, once bowed with worry, now looked steadier, as though he carried a lighter burden. He looked up as she entered, his eyes lighting with warmth. "There you are," he murmured. "I was afraid you'd forsake breakfast." Cordelia offered him a faint smile, pouring her own cup of coffee. "Not after the day I have planned. I need my wits about me." He nodded, sipping with deliberate calm. "You look beautiful, Cordelia." She felt a flutter of gratitude and apprehension. "Thank you, Papa. Today I'll begin settling into the ranch full-time. Nathaniel mentioned there were documents to sign and a housewarming dinner planned for tonight." He set down his mug, studying her face. "Have you thought about what you'll say if anyone questions you on the evening's boardwalk revelries? They may linger on conversation of propriety even now." Cordelia met his gaze steadily. "I'll speak only the truth, that I chose to stand by Nathaniel because he saw me as an equal, not as someone to be pitied. If any still doubts, I have nothing but my convictions to offer." Thomas nodded approvingly, swirling the coffee in his cup as though measuring each thought. "And what of Nathaniel? He seems willing to face the town's unrest, but do you think he's prepared for what lies beyond those fences?" She leaned forward, placing a hand on his calloused one. "He's braver than many men I know. Together, I believe we can weather whatever storms arise. I won't turn back now." Papa's jaw shifted, and for a heartbeat she wondered if regret flickered in his eyes. But then he exhaled, a soft sigh that seemed both exhausted and relieved. "Then may God grant you the strength to stand fast." They finished breakfast in companionable silence, the only sound the soft clink of spoon against cup. Cordelia sensed that while her union with Nathaniel had altered her path irrevocably, her father's love remained a steadfast anchor. Shortly after sunrise, Cordelia and Papa rode the wagon back to the ranch. The morning air was crisp, laden with the scent of dew-kissed grass and distant pine smoke. As Cedar Ridge dwindled behind them, Cordelia felt a peculiar pang, a bittersweet tug at her heart, knowing that leaving that world meant relinquishing familiar routines and comfortable reproach. When they arrived at the ranch house's front gates, they were greeted by Nathaniel's broad shoulders framed in the doorway. "Cordelia, Papa." She dismounted and embraced him, feeling the solidity of his strong arms around her. "Good morning," she said, voice brightening at the sight of him. He nodded to Papa. "Thomas, glad you came. Splitting time between ranch and store will be our arrangement until after the wedding. Until then, the legal matters await, and I want us all to be present for the housewarming tonight." Papa inclined his chin in agreement. "Of course." Nathaniel released Cordelia with a gentle smile and gestured toward a table on the veranda, where Mrs. Carmichael had laid out a stack of papers, quills, ink, and various documents. "We'll sign the property deed transfer first, then draft the prenuptial agreement, though I hope you find my terms equitable." Cordelia laughed softly. "I trust you implicitly, Nathaniel, but as you know, I'm not inclined to sign anything I haven't read thoroughly first." "Understandable," he replied, lifting one eyebrow. "Mrs. Carmichael will provide refreshments if you wish to take breaks." As they settled the documents between them, Cordelia recalled the day she first laid eyes on the sprawling estate, every detail reflecting Nathaniel's meticulous care. The native stonework carved to match the mountain ridges, the sturdy beams of the great hall, the endless horizon stretching like an invitation to possibility. Now, as she read through each clause, land boundaries, financial distribution, provisions for Papa's continued support, she felt the gravity of their future pressed into her hands. By the time the deed was signed, the sun hovered high in the sky. Nathaniel's fingers brushed hers briefly as he dipped his quill into the ink jar. "Thank you, Cordelia. I couldn't imagine a fairer partner." She met his gaze, heart warming. "Thank you for trusting me." Thomas rose from his chair. "If the paperwork's done, I'll return to the store now. Mother always said a man needs familiar work to steady his soul. I suspect my daughter feels the same." Cordelia rose, slipping her hand into Papa's. "I'll visit soon. We'll be busy getting the ranch ready for our first winter together." Squeezed her fingers, a silent vow of support. "Be careful out here, my girl." She nodded, watching as he climbed back into the wagon and waved farewell. As the wheels clattered over the gravel drive, Cordelia turned to Nathaniel, noticing again the subtle tension along his jaw. He'd hardly smiled since dawn. "What is it?" she asked gently. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes fixed on the receding wagon. "I've been invited to deliver a speech at the Cattlemen's Association dinner in 2 weeks. They specifically asked me to address the new challenges facing ranchers as settlements expand. I accepted, but now I wonder if I should announce our engagement there or keep it private until the wedding." Cordelia hesitated, considering the Cattlemen's Association wields significant influence in Montana. "If you present me to them as your fiancé, it might quell speculation, but it also exposes us to harsher scrutiny." He nodded slowly, the afternoon light casting delicate shadows across his angular features. "Precisely. I don't want to jeopardize our standing, but I also don't want to hide our union." Cordelia drew a deep breath, recalling the fierce pride she'd felt the night before, standing hand in hand with him beneath the lantern-lit boardwalk. "I say we announce it. Let them see that we stand together. If there's resistance, we'll meet it head-on. Hiding only emboldens rumors." Nathaniel's grey eyes softened with admiration. "You're right, as always. We shall announce our engagement at the dinner. And if any man doubts my judgment, let him speak to my face, as husband and wife." Cordelia smiled, relief and determination mingling in her chest. "Then it's settled. Let's prepare my remarks. If you desire a personal note, I'd be honored to stand by you on that evening." "Gentlemen," he began, voice rough with age, "tonight we gather not only to break bread, but to discuss the future of ranching in our territory." He paused to cough, glancing toward Nathaniel. "It's my honor to introduce Mr. Nathaniel Steele, whose wisdom and success guide us forward." The room erupted in polite applause as Nathaniel rose. He straightened, smoothing his jacket, then met Cordelia's eyes with a steely calm. He stepped forward to the center of the barn, where a simple wooden podium stood. "Gentlemen," he began, voice clear but warm, "thank you for your trust in me. We face uncertain times, settlements encroach, markets shift, and we must adapt if we are to endure. But before I begin, I have an announcement of a personal nature that I wish to share." A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. Cordelia's heart pounded as she rose and joined him at the podium. She stood beside him, her gown's lace collar soft against the rough-hewn timber floor. Nathaniel cleared his throat, eyes scanning the assembled men. "I am honored to introduce the woman who will soon be my wife, Miss Cordelia Blackthorne." Silence swallowed the barn. Cordelia took a breath, raising her hand in quiet greeting. "Gentlemen," she said, voice ringing with steady resolve, "thank you for welcoming me tonight. I know my background is not what one might expect of the Steele name, But I stand before you as Nathaniel's partner, devoted to this land, this community, and to facing every challenge at his side. A man near the back, a burly ranch hand named Teamson, rose and let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Welcome to the family, Miss Cordelia. A few other voices echoed in approval, murmurs of respect for her courage, a nod or two from older ranchers who recognized tenacity when they saw it. Henry Farweather sat stoically, lips pressed in a thin line, but his gaze no longer held open. Disdain. Instead, he seemed to weigh her worth on a new scale. Nathaniel squeezed Cordelia's hand before stepping up again. Cordelia will be joining me not just as my wife, but as my partner in every endeavor, ranching, community work, and the philanthropic efforts I hope to expand. Her education, her compassion, and her unwavering spirit bring fresh perspective to stewardship of the land. A hush settled, broken by a slow, deliberate clap from General McAllister. Soon the hall filled with applause, not universal but growing, until it became a steady wave. Magnolia Fairweather, seated beside Henry, averted her eyes, no doubt nursing her own wounded pride. Nathaniel cleared his throat once more, welcoming the shift in mood. Now, gentlemen, let us turn our attention to the cattle market projections. He spoke with measured clarity, Cordelia standing beside him as a silent sentinel of unwavering support. Each time their eyes met, she felt a surge of love and solidarity. Together, they elaborated on strategies to navigate grazing rights disputes and emerging rail routes, weaving practical guidance with visions of sustainable expansion. When he concluded, the applause this time was genuine, rooted in respect rather than obligation. Cordelia's chest swelled with pride as she descended from the podium. Nathaniel met her halfway, pulling her into a hushed embrace before leading her back to their seats. After the dinner, the barn emptied slowly, leaving only a handful of lingering conversations. Nathaniel escorted Cordelia outside into the cool night air, the sky a canvas of countless stars stretched above the rolling fields. "I believe it went well," she said quietly as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. He nodded, watching the lantern light recede from the barn's opening. "It did. You stood tall for both of us." And they listened. She leaned into him, savoring the warmth of his coat. "I saw Henry speaking with General McAllister. Perhaps he'll lend his influence in our favor." Nathaniel's lips curled in a slow smile. "Perhaps. More importantly, I saw leaders extend their hands in welcome. That carries weight." Silence fell between them, comfortable, unwavering. Cordelia realized that announcing their engagement had not only solidified her place beside Nathaniel, but had kindled new alliances. The future still held uncertainties, impending winter, shifting politics, and the ever-present threat of rivals. But together, they had proven that love and integrity could withstand scrutiny. He drew her closer, and together they gazed out over the land that would shape their life. The endless plains, the shelter of distant mountains, and the promise that, under the Montana sky, two determined hearts could chart their own destiny. Tonight, they had set their course. Now, hand in hand, they would journey forward, undaunted by tradition, fortified by love, and guided by the unbreakable conviction that they were indeed stronger together. Part 4. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the study, illuminating swirling motes of dust on the shelves of leather-bound volumes. Cordelia sat at the sturdy oak desk, mapping out plans for the upcoming winter, stocking grains in the granary, organizing the blankets and woolens in the storage room, ensuring that the cattle had adequate feed through the cold months. The scent of pine from the surrounding forest drifted through an open window, mingling with the faint aroma of ink and parchment. Nathaniel entered quietly, slipping into the room without closing the door behind him. He carried 2 steaming mugs of coffee in their thick, handleless pottery, one for each of them. Cordelia looked up, her steel-grey eyes warm with welcome. "Morning," he said, extending a mug. "I thought you might need this." "Thank you," she replied, taking the cup and savouring the rich, bitter warmth. "I was just reviewing the feed inventories. It seems we'll need an extra 6 bushels of oats to sustain the herd until spring." Nathaniel nodded, settling into a leather-bound chair across from her. "I've been in contact with the rail yard manager in Helena. They've agreed to expedite a shipment of hay, enough to see the cattle through December. Oats will follow by mid-November." Relief softened her features. "That's a blessing. We'll still need to ration carefully, but at least the herd will be fed." He took a slow sip of coffee, eyes tracing the lines of her determined profile. "Last night I spoke with Bram. He says the men are concerned about Billy Morrison's winter project. He's planning to fence his entire south pasture to expand his herd. That could encroach on some of our grazing grounds." She frowned, image of Billy's stubborn determination surfacing in her mind. "We can't afford to lose grazing land. I'll ride out with you this afternoon and speak to him. Perhaps we can negotiate a boundary that benefits both of us." Nathaniel's gaze was steady, appreciation shining beneath his grey eyes. "Your tact will serve us well." As he rose to leave, Cordelia called after him. "Nathaniel, take care today. Last week's confrontation with rustlers reminded me how unpredictable things can be out there." He paused at the door, offering a faint smile. "You worry too much, Miss Blackthorne, Mrs. Steele." A blush warmed her cheeks at the term, and he closed the door behind him, leaving her to the comforting mundanities of ranch management. By midday they had saddled their horses outside the corral. The sun shone brightly, but a chill lingered. In the breeze, a reminder that autumn would slip swiftly into winter. Cordelia glanced at Nathaniel as they rode side by side along the winding trail toward Morrison's south pastures. His posture was relaxed but vigilant, his senses attuned to every sound and movement. "Nathaniel," she began, "when we married, I never imagined I would inherit more than books and a portion of the general store. Yet now I find myself entrusted with decisions that affect hundreds of cattle. It's overwhelming." He met her gaze, concern softening his features. "You have shouldered more than a lifetime would ask of some. Yet I've only ever seen strength and intelligence in you." Her shoulders relaxed, but a small doubt remained. "Sometimes I fear I'll make a misstep, cost us too much." He reached out to gently steady her reins as they ascended a low rise that overlooked Morrison's fenced fields. "Making mistakes is part of managing anything worthwhile. We'll learn together." She fell silent, reflecting on his words as they descended into the golden grasses of Morrison's holdings. There, squinting against the sun, stood Billy Morrison, himself, lean, sunburned, hands on hips, as he inspected a stretch of sturdy new fencing. "Mr. Steele, Mrs. Steele," he greeted, tipping his hat with a mixture of respect and apprehension. "I wasn't expecting you out here." Nathaniel dismounted, offering a firm handshake. "Good afternoon, Mr. Morrison. We wanted to discuss the new fencing project." Billy nodded, brushing straw-colored hair from his forehead. "I'm setting up boundaries. Gonna run a bigger herd this winter. I reckon I need that pasture for it." Cordelia approached, riding Phoenix, the chestnut mare she had grown to trust. "Mr. Morrison, I admire your ambition, but the new fencing appears to cut into some of the grazing grounds we've traditionally shared for winter foraging. If we both need those lands, we'll face shortages early." Billy's brow furrowed. "And what would you have me do? I need room. Cattle prices are good now, and I can't pass this up." Nathaniel placed a reassuring hand on Cordelia's shoulder. "Mr. Morrison, we respect your need to expand, truly. But how about we negotiate a compromise? Perhaps we adjust the border by 20 rods to the east, which still gives you space for your expansion without reducing our winter range too severely. In return, we'd be willing to share some of our hay reserves from Helena's shipment, enough to feed the extra mouths you take on. Billy chewed on the proposal, silent for a long moment. He looked at Cordelia, at the certainty in her gaze, and then back to Nathaniel. That might work. If you can spare the hay, and I get proper boundary markers to keep cattle from drifting, I could live with that. Cordelia smiled, relief blossoming in her chest. We'll have Bram oversee the stakes placement. As for hay, I'll arrange for you to receive 20 tons delivered here by early next week. Billy nodded, extending his rough hand again. You've got a deal, but I'll need your help negotiating with San Francisco to hold my payment until after the season. I don't have enough cash now. Nathaniel squeezed Billy's hand. Consider it done. I'll put in a good word with my contacts. With agreements made, the three returned to their horses. Cordelia settled into Phoenix's saddle, allowing the mare's rhythmic gait to soothe her anxieties. Their alliance with Billy strengthened not only practical resource sharing, but also the communal bonds vital in this unforgiving territory. As the afternoon sun dipped toward the western ridges, Cordelia returned to the main house. The corridors echoed with the hushed bustle of preparations for the evening's arrival of more guests. Thomas Blackthorne, Father Hayes from Cedar Ridge, and a delegation from the Cattlemen's Association, each navigating their own balance between welcoming or questioning her place at Nathaniel's side. Mrs. Carmichael found her outside in the courtyard, pinning ribbons on the guests' intricate coats of arms, small embroidered banners that represented their families or ranches. Miss Cordelia, you should see how splendid everyone looks. The formal dinner will begin at 7. Cordelia's stomach fluttered at the reminder. Tonight, they would celebrate not only her marriage, but also the expanding alliances of the Steel name. She nodded, grateful for Mrs. Carmichael's steady guidance. Thank you. Could you fetch Papa's coat? He's just arrived. Mrs. Carmichael curtsied and hurried inside. Cordelia stayed in the cool evening air, inhaling the mingled scents of blooming wild sage and roasting venison from the kitchen. Footsteps crunched on the gravel drive. Cordelia turned to see Papa approaching, his graying hair neatly combed, his face lined yet proud. He carried a modest black coat, the fabric crisp under his steady grip. "Papa," she greeted, hurrying forward. He pulled her into a brief embrace, his voice low with pride. "You've become a woman of this land, Cordelia Steele. Come, let's not keep them waiting." She slipped her hand into his, and together they entered the great hall, headed toward a night that would test every ounce of their resolve and forge bonds both fragile and unbreakable. End of Part 4. Part 5. Winter settled over the Steele Ranch with an unhurried inevitability, as if the land itself had conspired to cloak the world in frost. Cordelia stirred awake to the soft hush of new snow drifting against her window pane, the early dawn light pale and silvery. She rose, pulling her woolen shawl close before descending the creaking stairs to the main hall where the great fireplace's embers glowed blood-red. A stack of fresh kindling lay ready near the hearth, and Mrs. Carmichael's gentle humming drifted from the kitchen beyond. Cordelia paused in the archway, inhaling the mingled scents of burning pine and brewing coffee. The warmth of the hearth reached her ankles, a comfort against the chill that had settled into every corner of the ranch. She settled on a stool near the fire as Nathaniel joined her, shoulders squared against a warm brown duster, his boots still dusted with yesterday's snow. His grey eyes briefly met hers before he removed his glove and offered her the cup, steaming with coffee. "Cold mornings are easier to face with hot coffee in hand," he said softly. She nodded, wrapping her fingers around the cup. "Thank you. I was just reviewing the herd's health records. I noticed several calves have slight coughs, probably. The bitter wind will need extra hay in those pens." Nathaniel set down his cup and leaned forward, eyes tracing the lines of her thoughtful expression. I arranged for 6 more tons of alfalfa to arrive this afternoon. Bram will oversee adding straw bedding to the stalls. That should help keep them warm. Cordelia's gaze softened in relief and gratitude. You think of everything. He exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. It's our livelihood. But more than that, I think of you. I don't like seeing you worry over every detail. She set her cup aside, the warmth of his concern both comforting and dangerous. I worry because I care. This land, these cattle, they're part of our story. I want to protect them for us. Nathaniel's gaze dropped to her hand resting on the hearth's edge. We'll protect them together, but you must rest when you can. You're not accustomed to these extremes. A soft knock cut through the quiet. Mrs. Carmichael entered, her apron dusted with flour from the morning's baking. She carried a tin box in one hand and glanced at Nathaniel. "The ledger, Mr. Barrett." "Requested, sir. And Miss Cordelia, you have 3 letters. One from Cedar Ridge, one from Helena's rail yard, and one from Garrison's store in Dillon." Cordelia rose, accepting the letters with a nod of thanks. She moved to a small table by the window, laying them out as she escorted Mrs. Carmichael back toward the hearth. The ledger, bound in rich leather, bore Barrett's insignia in dark, iron gilt. The letters, each sealed with wax, waited like silent couriers of news. Returning to her seat, Cordelia slit the Cedar Ridge envelope first. Inside lay a brief note from Mrs. Patterson. "Dear Cordelia, we hope you and Nathaniel are safely settling into winter life. Please know that many in Cedar Ridge commend your partnership, despite rumors. Stay strong, dear friend." The signature, penned in elegant script, felt like a small beacon of support. Next, she opened the letter from Helena's rail yard manager. It detailed a delay in the next scheduled shipment of cornmeal due to track maintenance, a setback, but temporary. Cordelia made a mental note to adjust rations accordingly. Finally, she broke the seal on the letter from Garrison's store. The letter inside read, "Dear Madam, enclosed. Please find the receipt for the new bolt of wool you requested. Unfortunately, the price has risen to $8 per yard due to the mining camp's increased demand. Please advise if you wish to proceed. Respectfully, James Garrison." Cordelia's brow creased at the news. Her plans for patching winter coats might need revising. Nathaniel knelt behind her, reading over her shoulder. He tapped the Garrison letter with a single finger. "We'll proceed. Warmth is worth the price. My accounts can absorb the increase." Bishide turned, meeting his resolve with gratitude. "Thank you, but still I'll write to them immediately." He offered her a gentle smile before rising and retrieving his gloves. "I have to inspect the hayfields before the next snowfall. Would you like to accompany me, or would you rather rest?" Cordelia stood, brushing lint from her skirt. "I'll come with you. I want to ensure everything is in order." They stepped into the courtyard, the cold air biting at exposed skin. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked to the barn, where 2 horses, Bram's trusted paint and a sturdy dun, waited saddled. Nathaniel helped Cordelia mount, careful of her balance, as she settled onto the dun's broad back, its flanks warm beneath her woolen cloak. "Keep your eyes on the tracks, not the sky," Nathaniel advised, as he swung into the saddle beside her. "It's easy to slip on the ice," she nodded, gripping the reins with gloved hands as they headed toward the northern hayfields. The ranch stretched out before them, like a white quilt, interrupted only by the dark line of fencing and the occasional silhouette of a lone pine standing sentinel. Near the far field, Bram appeared, guiding a small sled laden with more hay bales. His breath steamed in the cold as he loaded the hay with deliberate care. Nathaniel and Cordelia dismounted, approaching to inspect the progress. "We're on schedule," Bram reported, voice muffled by his scarf. "The men will finish staging the bales by nightfall, just before the next snowfall." Cordelia nodded, crouching to inspect a bale's binding. "Good. We'll distribute these evenly among the feed mangers." Nathaniel joined her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Your planning saved us from the worst of this storm's surprise." She looked up at him, their shared breath forming invisible puffs. "Your contacts in Helena were a godsend. I'm grateful every day for the chance to serve." "Beside you," he brushed a thumb across her cheek, his touch both gentle and grounding. "And I'm grateful for the strength and vision you bring." They rose, completing the inspection together. The sun had edged low, illuminating the horizon in a wash of pink. Nathaniel guided their horses back toward the main house, each step echoing beneath crisp hoofbeats. As evening settled in, the ranch house gleamed with lamplight. Cordelia found herself at the hearth in the parlor, reading aloud from a leather-bound journal, her own written reflections on the day's events, while Nathaniel reviewed correspondence from Helena's bank. The irony of their reversed roles, she as the scholar and he the businessman, was not lost on her. Footsteps on the stair announced Papa's return. He entered, cheeks flushed from the cold, clutching a small satchel. "I brought something for you," he said, handing her the satchel. "From Cedar Ridge." Cordelia untied the knotted strings and withdrew a carved wooden box. She lifted the lid to reveal a delicate linen scarf embroidered with intricate floral motifs, a gift from Mrs. Morrison and several other women of the town. Cordelia's eyes glistened. "They call it a token of goodwill, recognizing your place." "Here," Papa said quietly. "They said it symbolizes the townspeople's acceptance, however reluctant, of their daughter's new life." She pressed the scarf to her cheek, the fine linen soft against her skin. "I'll wear it tomorrow. Let it remind me of where I came from and how far we've come." Nathaniel looked on, pride mixed with tenderness in his eyes. "Cedar Ridge may have been slow to accept, but hearts and minds can change. You've shown them what integrity and love can accomplish." Cordelia nodded, looping the scarf around her neck as Papa took a seat by the hearth. The three of them shared a quiet meal. Roasted pheasant, winter squash, and hot broth. Conversation was gentle. Papa's updates on the general store's delayed shipments, Nathaniel's plans for reinforcing the West Pastures barn before the thaw, Cordelia's requests for more wool from garrisons. When the meal concluded, Nathaniel escorted Papa to the guest room with assurances of a warm fire and extra blankets. Cordelia lingered by the hearth, reflecting on the simple evening's domestic warmth, so different from the grand celebrations and fraught negotiations they had weathered. Before she could rise to retire, Nathaniel returned and stood behind her, brushing a hand over her hair. "Come, my love, it's time you rested. Tomorrow brings another dawn and new tasks." She turned to face him, the flicker of lamplight illuminating the depth of emotion in his eyes. "I'm not weary, Nathaniel, but I know you're right. I'll sleep better knowing you're here." He lifted her to her toes and kissed her forehead. "Rest now. The world is safer with you by my side." As she climbed the stairs to their bedroom, Cordelia felt the weight of a day well-lived settle into her bones. The scarf's soft linen brushed against her cheek, a reminder that acceptance could bloom even in harsh climates. And as she lay beneath the down-filled coverlet, she knew that together they would endure every winter, face every challenge and light every dark corner with the steadfast flame of their love. End of Part 5. A week passed in a flurry of overcast skies and heavy snow that blanketed the Montana plains. Cordelia sat at the north-facing window of the study, idly tracing the frost patterns forming delicate lace upon the glass. Outside, Bram and Hafer, dozen ranch hands, trudged through knee-high drifts, guiding a team of draft horses hauling bales of hay toward the east fields. The soft hiss of wind against the shutters underscored the stillness inside, broken only by the crackling hearth where Mrs. Carmichael tended a steady blaze. Cordelia's thoughts drifted to the letter she had received that morning from Father. Hayes in Cedar Ridge. She placed it on the desk, folding it carefully after reading it twice. His words were kind, a sermon's worth of reassurance that despite lingering misgivings among the townspeople, her union with Nathaniel was blessed in God's eyes. Her chest warmed at the sentiment, though she knew not all would find solace. In the priest's council, she rose and donned her woolen cloak, wrapping it tightly around her shoulders before tapping on the study door. Nathaniel looked up from the pile of winter ledgers he was finalizing, a quill poised above ink. He set it down at the sound of her knock. "Yes?" he asked, voice softening when he saw her. "May I join you?" she whispered, stepping into the warm glow of the desk lamp's halo. He nodded, pushing a stack of papers aside. She seated herself across from him. "I received a letter from Father Hayes. He reassured me that he stands with us in faith. But I know not all in Cedar Ridge share his perspective." His grey eyes darkened with concern. "I've heard rumors that some of the wealthier patrons at the general store are considering a boycott of our produce, choosing to buy overseas to spite me for marrying beneath my station." Cordelia's belly tightened at the thought. The general store she had planned to support by returning, the house Papa had built through years of sacrifice. She placed a hand on Nathaniel's. "We cannot let their pettiness endanger my father's livelihood." He squeezed her hand, resolve settling between them. "We'll meet with Papa tomorrow. I'll accompany you into town, speak to the merchants directly." She nodded, relief mingling with dread at braving the biting cold and the stifling judgment. The next morning, Cordelia rose early to help Mrs. Carmichael prepare a basket of home-baked cheese biscuits, dried apples, and cured ham for their trek into Cedar Ridge. She paced the foyer, smoothing dust motes from the furs draped over the banister and straightening her woolen riding skirt. When Nathaniel descended, flanked by Bram on one side and Jake on the other, both carrying rifles strapped to their backs, she felt the gravity of the mission, to stand before Papa's peers and demand respect. They rode out through the snow-laden courtyard, the clip-clop of their horses echoing through the stillness. As they crossed the wooden bridge spanning the frozen creek, Cordelia noticed the ranch hands watching them leave, their faces a blend of admiration and concern. She nodded to each in silent thanks, mindful of the fragile unity she and Nathaniel had forged among them. The ride into Cedar Ridge was deceptively short, just over half a mile through wind-whipped fields where tumbleweeds lay half-buried in snow. The town itself appeared muted beneath its frost-laden cloak, the wooden buildings' paint peeled and faded from relentless weather. But for the unseasoned, this sight might have sufficed for dignity. To Cordelia, it felt like a painted backdrop. For her scrutiny, they reined in at the boardwalk in front of the general store. A group of townspeople had already gathered, faces wrapped in thick scarves and heavy coats, curious if not hostile eyes assessing their approach. At the center, Magnolia Fairweather's expression had turned sullen, the once confident banker's daughter, now reduced to a silent observer without her usual entourage of admirers. Papa emerged from the store's doorway as they dismounted, his eyes scanning the gathering before settling on his daughter. Relief and worry crossed his lined features in rapid succession. "Cordelia, Nathaniel," he said, voice steady, though his knuckles dimmed white on the reins. "Thank you for coming." She offered him a sincere smile. "Papa." Nathaniel nodded respectfully, then turned his gaze to the assembled merchants, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Harris, and a half-dozen smaller shopkeepers whose progeny included barber, cobbler, and blacksmith. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, voice carrying easily across the boardwalk, "I understand there have been discussions about withholding purchases from the general store until our engagement rumors subside. I came today to speak plainly. Mr. Harris, whose bank had extended Nathaniel many a loan, stepped forward, his polished boots clicking on the boardwalk. Mr. Steele, this town has known Cordelia Blackthorne since she was a child. Her sudden rise in station is unsettling to many of us. We merely wish the best for our community, ensuring that loyalty and tradition are maintained." Cordelia bristled, but controlled her response. Nathaniel continued before she could speak. "Tradition is the backbone of Cedar Ridge, but so is reason. My marriage to Cordelia is not an attempt to breach those traditions, but to honor them with someone I consider my equal. In our partnership lies not disregard for this town, but the promise of prosperity. Together, we will strengthen the local economy, ensure better trade connections to Helena and beyond, and protect the land that supports us all." Mrs. Patterson, shawl wrapped tightly for warmth, stepped forward, her eyes somber. "We saw how strongly you stand by her. Perhaps I have been quick to judge." Nathaniel inclined his head toward her, offering a small nod. Cordelia laid a hand on Mrs. Patterson's arm, nodding gratefully. Mr. Harris cleared his throat, looking to the other shopkeepers. "Perhaps we may reconsider if Cordelia would be allowed to personally vow that the store's patronage will benefit broader Cedar Ridge, charity functions for the church, support for the school's new roof, and so forth. Might this council consider such a commitment?" Cordelia stepped forward, confidence radiating in her features despite the cold. "I will personally guarantee that every month we will donate a portion of the store's profits to community causes, beginning with the church's roof fund. I also vow to host storytelling nights in the basement once the seasons permit, free of charge for all families, to strengthen the community's bonds during the long winters." A murmur floated through the crowd, shifting from skepticism to cautious optimism. A few shopkeepers exchanged looks, nodding. "Very well," Mr. Harris said after a moment. "If you stand by your word, the general store shall remain a staple of Cedar Ridge." With that, the crowd dispersed, some lingering to shake Cordelia's hand. Nathaniel helped her mount as Papa embraced her, pride shining through his weathered face. Cordelia felt a surge of warmth that chased away the frosty cling of doubt. As they rode back toward the ranch, the tension in her limbs eased. She leaned against Nathaniel's side, letting him guide their mount through the biting wind. "I know this was hard," he said, breaking the quiet. "But you handled it with grace." She turned to him, breath catching on the chill. "Because you believed in me, and because Papa needed me to prove myself." He smiled, brushing a lock of dark hair behind her ear. "You've become someone I truly admire, far beyond anyone's expectations." Back at the ranch, life resumed its bustling rhythm under winter's white mantle. The barn's interior was warm and alive with the sounds of horses stampeding in restless stalls, the hushed murmur of ranch hands discussing the next chores, and the rhythmic clatter of shovels, clearing snow from feed mangers. Cordelia adjusted the blankets on a nursing mare while Bram guided newborn twins to suckle. Nathaniel emerged from the tack room, his boots still sodden from the morning's ride. He draped his coat over a bench before approaching her. "We've received word from the Helena Depot. Your father's donation to the church's roof fund was acknowledged in today's Gazette." They printed a brief notice praising Miss Cordelia's generosity. She paused, brush in hand, cheeks flushing. "They mentioned it?" He nodded, eyes alight. "Yes, they called it an inspiring act of goodwill, solidifying the bond between the ranch and the town." Cordelia allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. "Then winter will seem easier knowing hearts have softened." He reached for her hand, brushing straw from her fingers. "One more thing. I have arranged with Reverend Stewart to host a Christmas Eve dinner for the orphans and elderly in the ranch's great hall. I'd be honored if you would co-host it with me." Her eyes glistened at the gesture. "Of course, it will be my pleasure." He smiled at her, the warmth in his gaze dispelling the winter's chill. "Then let us prepare. We have much to do." December wore on with a gentle, unrelenting cold. Cordelia's days blurred into a pattern, waking before dawn to check cattle, overseeing the kitchen staff as they baked for the Christmas feast, coordinating with Mrs. Carmichael on table settings in the Great Hall, and consulting with Bram on the best strategies for snow removal around the barns and pasture fences. One afternoon, as the wind howled outside like an ancient spirit seeking entry, Cordelia found herself in the library, still recovering its warmth from last night's fire, thumbing through a dog-eared copy of Grimm's fairy tales. She paused when she noticed a parchment, folded and tucked between the pages. Her brow furrowed as she retrieved it, recognizing the familiar handwriting of Victoria Ashford. "Cordelia, if you are reading this, pray know that I have retreated to San Francisco's grand houses, where I may yet find favor. My divorce finalization proceeds apace, but it requires my personal presence. I trust you to deliver this letter to Nathaniel, for he must have the truth about your role in his affairs." Her breath caught as she unfolded the note fully. The letter continued. "I suspect you've grown confident in your place at the ranch, but do not be so naive as to believe I will allow you to remain. You have trespassed into my domain, and I will not rest until I reclaim what is rightfully mine: Nathaniel's fortune, his influence, and his heart." A frisson of alarm slithered down her spine. She recognized the signature's scrawl, elegant, precise, drenched in malice. Before she could gather her thoughts, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded as he regarded the letter in her hand. "Victoria's handwriting," he said quietly, voice taut. "She's returned." Cordelia's heart sank. "She wrote that she will not rest until she reclaims you." He closed the door behind him, crossing the room with purposeful strides. "That woman, always so cold. She thinks her gold and status grant her any prize she desires, but she will find that I will not be swayed by her threats." She stepped toward him, holding the parchment between them. "But she can sow fear in others. If she spreads rumors again—" He exhaled, erasing the hardness in his eyes with a long, slow flicker. "I know. I suspect she has influential allies in the city and possibly in Helena. I will be forced to handle her affairs in court. But this ranch, our home, is here. She cannot touch it without my consent." Cordelia's pulse fluttered, a storm of relief and renewed anxiety. "Then we must prepare. Your legal counsel in San Francisco might not suffice for Montana territories. In courts, I will arrange for a traveling attorney to review our case, and I want you to know that whatever she brings, I stand with you." He closed the distance between them, cupping her cheek in a gesture that spoke volumes more than harsh words. "I know, and it means everything to me. Together, let us weather her final gambits and emerge unbroken." Their whisper of resolve was sealed in a shared glance, hearts steeled against the approaching gale. Christmas Eve dawned bright and frosty, the sky clear and the sun shining off snow-crusted roofs like a scattering of diamonds. Cordelia awoke, early to oversee the final preparations for the evening's feast. The great hall had been transformed, long tables arranged around a towering evergreen centerpiece, garlands of holly and pine strung from the rafters, and lanterns hung to cast, soft pools of light over the gleaming floor. Stacks of steaming dishes lined the sideboard: roasted turkey, honey-glazed ham, mashed potatoes, buttery biscuits, and hearty stews bubbling in iron cauldrons. Bowls of sugared fruit and delicate pastries, gingerbread men and iced sugar cookies, offered sweet reprieve to weary hands. Nathaniel joined her by the hearth, the scent of pine from the evergreen wreath on his lapel mingling with the fire's warmth. "Tonight, we welcome the orphans from Cedar Ridge, hopeful for a reprieve from the cold and the elderly, many of whom need companionship more than food. Let us ensure no one here goes hungry or forgotten." Cordelia's eyes glistened at the sight of their accomplishment. Hands from every household on the ranch had labored through the night, family style, to prepare for this event. "It looks perfect," Thank you for trusting me to co-host." He offered his arm, nodding toward the hall. "Shall we begin?" They entered together, hands clasped. The room fell hushed as they approached the head table, then erupted into gentle applause upon their appearance. The orphans, wide-eyed in their holiday best, stared in wonder at the scene, the dangling ornaments, the delectable feast, and the warmth that enveloped them like a welcome blanket. Nathaniel stepped forward first, clearing his throat. "Tonight, we celebrate not only Christmas but community, the bond between those who have and those in need. Our ambition is not to display our wealth, but to share it, to honor the season's true spirit. Let us break bread together and find solace in each other's company." Cordelia followed, her voice steady but brimming with emotion. "To the children, may this evening kindle in your hearts a spark of joy and hope that will guide you through every winter night. To the elders, may you find warmth not only in these walls, but in knowing you are cherished. And to all of us, may kindness be the compass that points us through every storm ahead." A hush settled as they raised their glasses of spiced cider. In unison, "Merry Christmas," Nathaniel said. "Merry Christmas," Cordelia echoed, her voice a steady beacon, and as they poured the cider for the waiting guests, each heart, not just those of the orphans or elders, felt the truth of their words. In that moment, the rage of past betrayals and the chill of external threats faded in the glow of shared gratitude and unity. As the evening deepened, laughter and conversation threaded through the hall like a vibrant tapestry. Children clambered onto Papa's broad lap to hear Christmas carols he sang in a deep baritone, while Mrs. Morrison and Mrs. Patterson led the elders in a quiet hymn by the hearth. Cordelia moved among them, handing platters to hungry hands, sharing gentle words of encouragement with tear-bright eyes. Nathaniel watched her, his gaze soft with pride. He retrieved her to dance beneath the evergreen boughs as Father Hayes led. A circle of dancers to the lilting tune of a fiddle. Cordelia's heart fluttered, a rare sense of being fully seen, fully known, and fully celebrated by a community once hostile. When the final hymn faded and plates emptied, Cordelia slipped away to the veranda to breathe in the night air. She rested her gloved hands on the railing, gazing out over the snow-draped fields towards Cedar Ridge's distant glow. From behind, Nathaniel joined her, draping a woolen blanket around her shoulders. They stood in silence, listening to the wind sigh through the pines and the distant hawk's lonely cry. Tonight was perfect, she whispered, leaning into him. He pressed his cheek to hers. You brought light to this place, Cordelia, not because of any station you hold, but because of the goodness in your heart. She turned to face him, her steel-gray eyes reflecting the starlight. You taught me to believe that love and faith can transform even the harshest landscapes. He tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, his hand trembling with emotion. And you've taught me that strength can be gentle, and that the fiercest love is born from standing side by side, no matter the storms. Their words lingered in the hush. Between them, the season's magic weaving around their hearts. The morning after Christmas, Cordelia awoke to find Nathaniel gone. She dressed quietly, venturing downstairs to find Bram and a small group of ranch hands gathered by the study door, murmuring in hushed concern. Mrs. Carmichael stood to one side, her hands folded as she watched Cordelia's approach. What's happened? Cordelia asked, heart thudding in her chest. Bram turned, his lined face unusually grave. Mr. Steele rode toward the eastern pasture at first light. The foreman heard a single rifle shot minutes ago, and now he hasn't returned. Cordelia's breath caught, a scream trapped in her throat. She seized Bram's arm. What do you mean he hasn't returned? He swallowed, eyes averted. We went to track him and found only his empty saddle. Memories of the rustler's attack. surged like wildfire through her mind, every shadow-laden draw, every distant echo of a rifle firing. She forced herself to breathe, though her limbs trembled like fraying ropes. "Call Henry Farweather," Nathaniel had once cautioned, a reminder that the world beyond these walls existed. But now she realized no cavalry would arrive in time. It would be the land's harsh verdict alone. Papa appeared then, mustache flecked with frost, knocking aside Bram's rifle as though it were a twig. "Where's Nathaniel?" Cordelia's vision blurred. He's gone." Papa's face paled, but he wrenched himself upright as though mustering every shard of denial. "He's not gone. Something must have happened, perhaps a fall, a misstep." Cordelia's chest tightened. "We must find him. He could be injured, exposed to the cold. It's only a matter of time." Papa's eyes burned with determination. "Then we hunt. Bishop Newton, you pack supplies, lanterns, blankets, whiskey, anything to keep him safe. Bram, get Horsley, the tracker from town. We ride at once." Cordelia nodded, swallowing down terror to focus on action. The world felt fracturing at its seams. No warmth of hearth or celebration could shield her now. But she would not stand by as Nathaniel's life slipped into the winter snow. Resolute, she wrapped her cloak, cinched her boots, and mounted Bram's fastest pony. Papa joined her, and together, a horse's length apart, they galloped across the frozen expanse. Late morning's light filtered through skeletal willows as they reached the eastern pasture. Nathaniel's abandoned saddle lay atop a snowdrift, empty stirrups dangling like silent lament. Cordelia slipped from her mount, knee-deep in snow, and knelt beside it. His glove remained tucked beneath the horn, frost forming crystals on the leather. A single track led away toward the timberline, indistinct, as though someone had dragged Nate's body toward the thicket. Her heart lurched, but Bram knelt, studying the tracks with trained eyes. "He was on foot when he fell, Miss Blackthorne," he murmured. "See, his boot print just one more shallow than the others." He stumbled, tried to catch himself, but something happened at the edge of the creek. At Cordelia's insistence, Herrick, the tracker, examined the fresh prints. "There's a slide here," he said, voice low. "Looks like a hillock of snow gave way. Maybe he tried to chase an animal to scare it off. Or someone may have tried to cause it." Cordelia's throat constricted. The possibility of foul play twisted in her gut like ice. "Foul play? Why? Who?" Papa placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "Let's find him first." For hours they followed the trail across trembling ice, through stands of bare pines where the wind moaned like ancient ghosts. At one point, Papa shielded her from a sudden gust so fierce it knifed the air with icy fragments. She drew courage from his protective presence, acknowledging that, in this moment, fear needed to be set aside. Finally, as the sun dipped low, casting long, ominous shadows, they found Nathaniel at the edge of a deep ravine, a man unmoving, half covered in snow, his brow furrowed as though in a silent prayer. "Nathaniel!" Cordelia cried, rushing forward beside Papa. Bram and Herrick followed, kneeling to inspect his pulse. Relief thundered through her when Bram nodded. "He's alive," Bram announced, voice ragged, "but unconscious. We must move him quickly, get him back to the barn." Papa and Bram each gripped an arm, hoisting Nathaniel's body between them as Cordelia and Herrick led the horses back through the snow. The trek felt endless, every breath a struggle, every moment threatening to rob them of their prize. Yet she pushed onward, recalling Nathaniel's own words, "Together we face whatever comes." At last, the ranch's lantern-lit barns appeared, promising warmth and safety. She and the men slid Nathaniel gently onto a bale of straw in the hayloft, stripping away his soaked layers and wrapping him in blankets until only his weathered face remained visible beneath a shock of dark hair flecked with frost. Mrs. Carmichael applied a gentle compress to his brow, her face pale with concern. His body temperature's dangerously low. We must raise it slowly. Cordelia knelt at the bedside, grasping his hand with trembling fingers. Papa stood behind her, his presence unwavering. Through the long hours of the night, they took turns, holding hot water bottles at Nathaniel's feet and exchanging whispered prayers. As the moon climbed overhead, casting silver light upon the snow-crusted roof, Nathaniel stirred. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. His eyes fluttered open, grey pools of confusion morphing into relief as he recognized Cordelia's distraught face. "Cordelia, Papa," she exhaled, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "You frightened us. We found you at the ravine, frozen. You're safe now. We're here." His eyes cleared as he assessed her through a haze of fever and relief. "Your faith kept me alive." Papa stepped forward, pressing a warm cloth to his forehead. "Rest now, Nathaniel. You're safe." Exhaustion claimed Cordelia's consciousness, and she drifted into a dream-filled sleep where sandalwood and pine mingled in a lullaby of hope. When Cordelia opened her eyes, dawn's pale light filtered through the narrow window of the sick room. Nathaniel lay beside her on a clean set of blankets pulled across the mattress, his breathing steady but slow. His cheeks carried a flush of fever, but his grip on her hand tightened as she stirred. "You're awake," she whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from his brow. He managed a faint smile, haunted but warm. "I felt your hand and Papa's prayers. Thank you." She pressed her free hand to his chest, close enough to feel his rapid heartbeat beneath his shirt. "We feared we'd lost you, but you're going to recover. I'll make sure of it." He exhaled, wincing at the simple act of breath, but resolute. "I owe you my life, Cordelia. I realize now how fragile everything is. You showed me this morning what it means to fight for each other, and I can't bear the thought of leaving you alone." She trembled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Promise me you'll rest. Papa and Bram have taken over the barn chores. I'll be here with you. You must focus on healing." He nodded, then rested his head back against the pillow. "Promise. But when I'm stronger, I want us to face Victoria's final plea, this time in court. I won't hide from her attempts to destroy us." Cordelia reached into the small satchel beside the bed, pulling out a worn, leather-bound Bible Father Hayes had sent from Cedar Ridge. "I will be by your side every step. We'll face her together." He closed his eyes, a soft surrender passing over his face. Together. Several days passed in a blur of medicinal broths, warm blankets, and slow, steady strides toward recovery. With Bram and Papa overseeing the herd and monitoring the ranch's day-to-day needs, Cordelia never left Nathaniel's side. She read to him from Dickens and Burns, her voice a gentle balm, while Mrs. Carmichael tended to his every comfort: fresh water, steady heat, and nourishing soups that coaxed strength back into his bones. At last, one crisp afternoon, Nathaniel sat upright in bed, the fever finally broken. Cordelia pressed a kiss to his forehead, her relief profound. "How do you feel?" she asked, her hand smoothing his dark hair. "Like I'm seeing spring after the longest winter," he replied, voice stronger but still husky. "But there's business, and to attend. Victoria's divorce, my finances, they need my attention." She nodded, steeling her resolve as she glimpsed the determination rekindling in his grey eyes. She reached into the satchel on the bedside table and withdrew a letter from their chosen attorney in Helena. "I've arranged for Golding and Pierce to represent you. They'll appeal the case in Trinidad's presiding court next month. That should stall any attempts by Ashford to seize your assets." His gaze softened with gratitude. "Thank you." Cordelia settled back beside him, allowing the comfort of his presence to wash over her. "Rest, Nathaniel. The world can wait a little longer." He reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I can't wait to walk into it with you by my side." Their fingers laced together, warming each other as though an unspoken vow passed between them. And as the ranch's silvered fields stretched out beyond the window, quiet, glistening, brimming with renewed promise, Cordelia and Nathaniel faced forward, ready to write the final chapter of their extraordinary love story. Spring crept across Montana's vast horizon like a tentative whisper, melting winter's last snows into rivulets that wound through the steely grasses. Cordelia emerged onto the veranda at dawn, inhaling the scent of thawing earth, wild sage, and fresh-cut hay. Beyond, the last barn rafter shimmered in the first light as the ranch hands bustled to prepare for calving season. In all her days at Steel Ranch, she had never felt spring's promise more keenly. Its arrival heralded renewal not only of the land, but of her life with Nathaniel. She wrapped her shawl more securely against the lingering chill, her gaze tracing the trail where Bram and two wranglers led a steer to fresh pasture. Behind them, the massive ranch house rose like a stone sentinel, its windows reflecting pink skies. Nathaniel joined her at the railing, his dark hair still damp with dew, grey eyes reflecting both hope and determination. "Good morning," he said, softly offering her a tin cup of coffee. The steam curled like tendrils of promise. "Morning," she replied, her tone warm with the shared comfort of ritual. "You look well." He exhaled, relief flickering across his features. "I slept through the night without fever. Bram said he found me sleeping like a baby," she smiled, setting aside her cup to brush a pinch of lint from his sleeve. "I'm glad, but I know you're anxious. Victoria's petition will be heard in 2 days." His jaw stiffened, the hard line tempered by the early sun's glow. 2 days. Golding and Pierce have submitted every document, but I must stand in court. I'll ride to Helena tonight to meet with them. Cordelia's heart clenched at the thought of him enduring the cold, jostling carriage rides and dusty travels to confront Ashford's lawyers. "Let me go with you, Nathaniel. I will not be left behind." He hesitated, placing a calloused hand over hers. "This is a man's fight. I cannot jeopardize your delicate health again." She lifted his hand to her lips, warmth lingering against his palm. "He fights a malicious argument, not mere legalese. I need to stand with you, not only for my own conviction, but to show Victoria that I will not cower. If she believes I'm simply a weak link to be severed, she has another thing coming." Nathaniel studied her resolute expression, eyes softening with unwavering love. "If you insist, then we will ride together. But we'll leave after supper, so we travel under the cover of darkness and return as soon as the hearing is done." She nodded, gratitude and love flooding her chest. "Thank you." The day unfolded in a ceremonial flurry of activity. Calves were born in the southeast pasture, each newborn breath a testament to the cycle of life. Cordelia witnessed one birth through frosted window panes, a powerful reminder of hope amid past hardship. By midday, she had escorted Mrs. Carmichael to collect fresh eggs and milk from the coop and dairy, and she'd reviewed the final inventory of hay, ensuring the pastures were ready for spring grazing. A rider arrived in the early afternoon, a messenger from Cedar Ridge, entrusted with a sealed parchment bearing the Blackthorn seal. Cordelia recognized the courier's intent gaze as he extended the letter. She accepted it, breaking the seal with a quiet breath. Inside was a proclamation from Reverend Hayes, his script formal. "To Mr. and Mrs. Nathaniel Steele, blessings multiply. When two strive together in good will, know that Cedar Ridge stands behind you both as preeminent pillars of community and faith. May God's grace guard your endeavors." Signed with a flourish, the letter renewed her faith that, despite Ashford's machinations, their support extended beyond mere commerce. It was a written bulwark against the tides of rumor. She folded the letter carefully and rode into the house, where Nathaniel awaited, fastening his saddle on the black stallion. "Reverend Hayes sends his blessings," she announced. He paused mid-adjustment, then offered her a practice smile. Then let no court threats taint the truth of our union. She nodded, her heart steady. Let us ride. They set out at dusk, horses' breath puffing in the chill air as they traversed the winding trail through sapling pines. Behind them, Steel Ranch receded into a silhouette of dark timber against a violet sky. Ahead lay the flagstone thoroughfare leading to Helena, the territorial capital, a place of clattering carriages, bustling docks where goods from San Francisco arrived, and an imposing courthouse built from white limestone that gleamed coldly. Beneath lantern light, they arrived under a near full moon, its silver glow illuminating fractured ice sheets on the Clark Fork River bordering the town. Nathaniel guided the horses to a stable adjacent to the Golden Eagle Inn, instructing the wrangler to secure feed and water while they took minimal provisions in a single trunk. The inn's common room, warm with lantern light and the murmur of travelers, felt both comforting and foreign, her first time in a place so alive with strangers. They secured a single room near the rear of the inn, sparse but serviceable, a bed of straw beneath 3 patched quilts, a small wash-basin at the corner, and a shuttered window overlooking the alley. Cordelia lit a small candle and set it on the windowsill, its flame trembling as she and Nathaniel sat opposite, faces etched with solemn purpose. He took her hand, tattooed with winter's memory of frost, and brushed his thumb over the calluses that had grown from days of hard labor. Let us review the case. I will need to recall every detail of our marriage, how we met, how we overcame every obstacle. She exhaled, drawing courage from his gaze. Golding and Pierce drafted our petition, a formal declaration that our union was forged in consent and mutual esteem, not under duress. I must be prepared to speak on your behalf should they attempt to depict me as coerced or of questionable character. Nathaniel nodded, smoothing his jacket. They'll try. Victoria's lawyers are ruthless, but truth has a habit of shining through. The darkest arguments, I believe in our truth. She rose, retrieving the leather petition from her satchel. The document, penned in elegant calligraphy, bore the signatures of prominent Helena citizens who had attested to their character. Golding and Pierce's lead attorney, Reverend Stewart, Bram, and Sheriff Coleman, his name alone weighing heavily as validation of her integrity. Read it aloud so I can memorize any necessary points, Nathaniel said quietly, eyes steady. She cleared her throat and read, We, Nathaniel Steele of the Steele Ranch, 1 cattle worth, and Cordelia Blackthorne, daughter of Thomas Blackthorne, general store proprietor of Cedar Ridge, do affirm our union in accord with mutual affection and respect. We declare that our marriage was solemnized on the 21st day of the 3rd month, in the year 1865, witnessed by Reverend Matthews of Cedar Ridge, Bram Miller, foreman of Steele Ranch, and Elizabeth Morrison, widow of the Harrison County physician. No promises other than those of honest companionship and equitable partnership were exchanged. Both parties entered this union of their own free will, without influence or coercion. This declaration is submitted to the Tribunal of Montana Territory, humbly requesting recognition of our marriage's legality and standing. Nathaniel rose, stepping behind her to gaze out the window at the moon-silvered alleyway. Strong, clear. But if they dispute the witness's integrity, we must stand ready to testify ourselves. Their ploy will be to discredit Bram as a hired, and Reverend Matthews as too close to my ranching interests, and Mrs. Morrison as my friend rather than her father's ally. Cordelia set down the petition, meeting his gaze through the silvery glow. Then I will testify to Bram's vigilance and integrity, Reverend Matthews's unyielding faith, and Mrs. Morrison's unwavering friendship. Facts that cannot be shaken. And if they tarnish my reputation, I will stand before that tribunal and proclaim my honor. Nathaniel stepped forward, bracketed her by the candlelight. You are my equal in every respect. Do not doubt your standing. Tonight rest your mind. Tomorrow we stand tall." They retired to the thin bed, finding solace in each other's arms, despite the world conspiring beyond their door. At dawn, the streets of Helena were alive with the clang of blacksmith hammers, the creak of wagon wheels, and the distant echo of men's boots against cobblestone. Cordelia and Nathaniel arrived at the courthouse, flanked by Golding and Pierce's team, two solemn-faced attorneys whose hearing was to begin in the tribunal's wooden chamber upstairs. The gallery, rows of benches where townspeople and curious onlookers sat, had begun filling early, for news of Ashford's vendetta had travelled quickly. Victoria's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Crandall, took his place at the opposing counsel's bench, his gaze as cold as steel. Beside him sat Victoria's representative, a prim woman in widow's weeds whose name Cordelia knew as Mrs. Langley. After introductions, the Honourable Judge Horsley, an imposing figure whose greying beard lent an aura of venerable authority, began the proceedings. "We convene today to address the petition filed by Nathaniel Steele and Cordelia Steele regarding the legality and standing of their union, representation by Golding and Pierce on behalf of the petitioners, and by Crandall and Langley on behalf of the respondent, Victoria Ashford. Petitioner, present your case." Golding and Pierce's lead attorney, Mr. Pierce, rose. "Your Honour, we submit incontrovertible documents proving the marriage was consensual, publicly documented, and blessed by the Church. We call Bram Miller, foreman of Steele Ranch, to attest to his presence at the ceremony and to the mutual devotion of the parties." They called Bram forward. The foreman, rugged, sun-browned and unflinching, told of his journey to Cedar Ridge, of Reverend Matthews's solemnization, and of his observation of Nathaniel's genuine regard for Cordelia. When asked of her demeanour, Bram said, "She never wavered. She spoke clearly of her love for him and her desire to partner in ranch affairs." Golding and Pierce laid a flurry of follow-up questions. Was there any sign of coercion? Did Nathaniel ever utter forceful words? Could Bram attest to the wedding's officiation and subsequent village acknowledgements? Each answer solidified the petition's integrity. "No further questions," Pierce concluded. "We now call Reverend Matthews of Cedar Ridge." Reverend Matthews, thin and earnest, with eyes still bright with conviction, addressed the court. "I solemnize the union of Nathaniel and Cordelia on March 21st. Both entered willingly, sharing vows of affection and partnership. Their love was evident to my heart as to any observer." Crandall rose to challenge, his tone sharp. "Reverend, did you know that Mr. Steele was a wealthy rancher and Miss Blackthorne the daughter of a modest shopkeeper? Could her consent be considered uninfluenced, given his status?" The Reverend's eyes narrowed. "Sir, faith compels me to see. Souls, not status. I would not solemnize a union I believed inequitable in love or consent." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Support murmurs, Cordelia noted, and faces she recognized from Cedar Ridge nodding in solidarity despite the distance. Finally, Mrs. Morrison, now visiting from Helena, took the stand. "Your Honour, I have known Cordelia since she was a girl. In her, I see character and fortitude. Her partnership with Nathaniel is no pragmatic arrangement. It is born of mutual esteem and intellectual kinship." Crandall attempted further cross-examination, probing Mrs. Morrison's relationship with the couple, but found her steadfast and unwavering. "I am her friend. Does friendship alone deny credibility? If Miss Blackthorne were not sincere, I would have seen it long ago." At last, after hours of testimony, the moment arrived for Nathaniel and Cordelia to take the stand. Judge Horsley addressed Nathaniel first. "Mr. Steele, please present your account." Nathaniel approached, boots clicking on polished wood. He spoke with measured conviction, recounting the chronology. his first sighting of Cordelia sweeping her, Father Store, the humble dignity she bore, the shared moment in the backyard that unveiled her keen intellect, his offer for her to catalogue his library, and their blossoming partnership. I chose her above all because she saw books and me beyond mere surface. She judged character by depth of mind and heart. Crandall rose to challenge. Did you ever consider that her acceptance of employment at your ranch was motivated not by love, but by ambition to secure your wealth? Nathaniel turned to Cordelia for a heartbeat of silent solidarity, then faced Crandall. Every moment I spent in her company revealed her selflessness. She did not court my fortune. She declined coffee from my hand when others would crave the favor. I offered fair wages. She worked for love of the work, not a promise of more. Our love was never conditional on wealth. A hush fell. Then Judge Horsley beckoned Cordelia. She stepped forward, gown sweeping the floor quietly. Your Honor, I came to Steel Ranch as a shepherd of books, not a seeker of fortunes. I chose love and partnership with Nathaniel, elliptical, unadorned. Terms, founded on mutual respect, not social advantage. If Victoria Ashford believes otherwise, let her reveal her heart's motives, as mine were never financial. Crandall attempted one last maneuver, dredging rumors of Victoria's influence in Helena, but Cordelia met his insinuations with a calm gaze. I hold no illusions about my origins, but it is not mine to prove worth by birth, but by integrity and deeds. I stand here with a clear conscience, having given my word and my heart without reservation. The tribunal's final moments stretched like taut wire. Outside, some townsfolk waited to learn of the outcome, yet another wind blowing. Beyond the courthouse walls, Judge Horsley pounded his gavel once, then twice. On the matter of legality and standing of the union between Nathaniel and Cordelia Steele, the court finds no evidence of coercion, fraud, or undue influence. The marriage was indeed consensual, properly solemnized, and promptly acknowledged by immediate witnesses. This court hereby upholds the petitioner's request and declares their marriage fully legal and recognized within Montana territory. A breathless hush was followed by an uproar of applause from their few supporters. Cordelia's cheeks warmed as she exchanged ecstatic glances with Nathaniel, her heart pounding with gratitude and triumph. Crandall and Mrs. Langley exchanged terse nods, dusting pencils against law-bound tomes before rising in silent exit. Outside, the murmur of horse hooves and carriage wheels signaled the public's swift spread of the verdict. Nathaniel and Cordelia wrapped in embraces, their relief absolute. They returned to Steel Ranch under a sky bright with dawn's first blush. The journey home, if anything, felt more profound than their earlier ride into Helena. This was the homecoming of two souls vindicated and validated. Spring had awakened in full bloom, meadows dotted with lupine, streams running clear and cool, and the ranch's fences humming with fresh life. Cordelia inhaled deeply as they crossed the threshold of their domain. Papa greeted them with a warm embrace, tears glinting in his eyes as he recognized the weight lifted from their shoulders. "You've proven your bond," he said quietly. "May your life together reflect the truth you've defended." They spent the day organizing a celebration for the ranch hands, a midday feast of fresh-caught trout, roasted venison, and the first new potatoes of the season. Laughter mingled with music as fiddles rose and hands clapped. Cordelia danced with Mrs. Morrison, and Magnolia watched from the porch, her expression a blend of contrition and awe. Nathaniel joined her by the hayloft, where they watched the cows calving in the neighboring fields. He wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her close. "Now that Victoria's shadows have been banished, we can truly build our legacy. Together," she murmured, leaning against him as the ranch echoed with life's sturdy rhythms. Summer arrived in golden splendor, fields ripened with barley, the cattle's hide gleamed in midday sun, and the air was thick with wild rose and clover. Cordelia and Nathaniel embarked on the final chapter of their love story, planning their formal wedding, not merely a legal ceremony, but a joyful proclamation to the territory that their union was celebrated and unassailable. They invited friends from Helena, Reverend Stewart, Bram, Sheriff Coleman, and esteemed guests from Cedar Ridge, Papa, Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Patterson, and a handful of townspeople whose transformation of heart marked the depth of their conviction. The ceremony was set beneath a maple grove on the ranch's highest ridge, where the horizon stretched in limitless green and gold. On the appointed day, Cordelia stood in a simple yet elegant white gown, her hair coiled into a braid adorned with wildflowers picked that morning. She held a bouquet of lily of the valley, wild rose and sage, symbols of purity, love's embrace, and protection. Nathaniel waited beneath an arch of intertwined branches and rose vines, wearing a tailored riding suit with a waistcoat of deep forest green, colors that spoke of the land they cherished. The guests gathered beneath the canopy of maple leaves, dappled light dancing upon their faces. Reverend Stewart opened the service with a hymn, his voice resonant as summer's warmth. When he reached the moment of blessing, he turned to them with a gentle smile. "Nathaniel and Cordelia, your marriage has already been affirmed by court and conscience. Today, we celebrate it with joy and thanksgiving before God and these witnesses. As you walk life's winding path, may love always guide your steps." Nathaniel took Cordelia's hands in his steady gaze meeting hers. "Cordelia Steele, I have known loneliness's harsh winter and heartbreak's feverish dream. But in you, I found my spring, hope, companionship, and the promise of tomorrow. With this ring, I pledge my life, my land, and my heart to you as your partner for all seasons." Cordelia's eyes shone with tears as she placed a simple gold band over his finger. "Nathaniel Steele, you have taught me that love need not yield to convention, that mutual respect is the bedrock of devotion. With this ring, I pledge my unwavering faith, my labors, and my heart to you, forever your equal and your support." As they pressed the rings into place, an ecstatic cheer rose among the guests. They sealed their vows with a kiss that tasted of summer bloom and unspoken dreams. The celebration that followed stretched late into the summer night, a feast of prime roast beef, sweet corn on the cob, buttered zucchini, and sparkling cider in crystal goblets. Children danced barefoot in the meadow to the strains of Bram's fiddle, while the adults shared toasts beneath firefly-lit lanterns. Magnolia Fairweather, once Cordelia's greatest rival, approached in humility and held out a small wooden box. Inside lay a hand-embroidered handkerchief, its white linen edged with blue thread. Cordelia's name and wedding date were stitched in delicate script. "I wish you both every happiness," Magnolia said, voice unsteady. "I envy the courage you've shown. Thank you for teaching me a better way." Cordelia accepted the gift with grace. "Thank you, Magnolia. May you find your own happiness in time." As the stars blazed in the summer sky, Nathaniel and Cordelia stood on a low knoll overlooking their wedding's jubilant festivities. The moon cast everything in a serene glow, highlighting the circle of guests below, their laughter echoing like hearthside warmth. Nathaniel draped Cordelia in his arms, his eyes slow with wonder. "We've forged a path through winter's trials, legal storms, and society's judgments, and still, here we stand, stronger for every challenge." She smiled up at him, their foreheads touching in an intimacy beyond words. "Our story was never a quiet one, but it has been honest, daring, and full of love. I wouldn't have it any other way." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, the summer breeze carrying the faint scent of roses and freshly turned soil. "Then, let us walk forward, Cordelia Steele, partners in life, in love, and in every dawn yet to break." They turned together toward their jubilant guests, hands entwined, hearts unburdened by storms past. as their laughter mingled with the night's song. Montana's endless sky stretched above them, an open canvas for the love they had fought to claim and the legacy they would build together. Judge Horsley addressed Nathaniel first. "Mr. Steele, please present your account." Nathaniel approached, boots clicking on polished wood. He spoke with measured conviction, recounting the chronology, his first sighting of Cordelia sweeping her father's store, the humble dignity she bore, the shared moment in the backyard that unveiled her keen intellect, his offer for her to catalogue his library, and their blossoming partnership. "I chose her above all because she saw books and me beyond mere surface. She judged character by depth of mind and heart." Crandall rose to challenge. "Did you ever consider that her acceptance of employment at your ranch was motivated not by love, but by ambition to secure your wealth?" Nathaniel turned to Cordelia for a heartbeat of silent solidarity, then faced Crandall. "Every moment I spent in her company revealed her selflessness. She did not court my fortune. She declined coffee from my hand when others would crave the favor. I offered fair wages. She worked for love of the work, not a promise of more. Our love was never conditional on wealth." A hush fell. Then Judge Horsley beckoned Cordelia. She stepped forward, gowns sweeping the floor quietly. "Your Honor, I came to Steele Ranch as a shepherd of books, not a seeker of fortunes. I chose love and partnership with Nathaniel, elliptical, unadorned. Terms founded on mutual respect, not social advantage. If Victoria Ashford believes otherwise, let her reveal her heart's motives, as mine were never financial." Crandall attempted one last maneuver, dredging rumors of Victoria's influence in Helena, but Cordelia met his insinuations with a calm gaze. "I hold no illusions about my origins, but it is not mine to prove worth by birth, but by integrity and deeds. I stand here with a clear conscience, having given my word and my heart without reservation." The tribunal's final moments stretched like taut wire. Outside, some townsfolk waited to learn of the outcome, yet another wind blowing. Beyond the courthouse walls, Judge Horsley pounded his gavel once, then twice. On the matter of legality and standing of the union between Nathaniel and Cordelia Steele, the court finds no evidence of coercion, fraud, or undue influence. The marriage was indeed consensual, properly solemnized, and promptly acknowledged by immediate witnesses. This court hereby upholds the petitioner's request and declares their marriage fully legal and recognized within Montana territory. A breathless hush was followed by an uproar of applause from their few supporters. Cordelia's cheeks warmed as she exchanged ecstatic glances with Nathaniel, her heart pounding with gratitude and triumph. Crandall and Mrs. Langley exchanged terse nods, dusting pencils against law-bound tomes before rising in silent exit. Outside, the murmur of horse hooves and carriage wheels signaled the public's swift spread of the verdict. Nathaniel and Cordelia wrapped in embraces, their relief absolute. They returned to Steele Ranch under a sky bright with dawn's first blush. The journey home, if anything, felt more profound than their earlier ride into Helena. This was the homecoming of two souls, vindicated and validated. Spring had awakened in full bloom. Meadows dotted with lupine, streams running clear and cool, and the ranch's fences humming with fresh life. Cordelia inhaled deeply as they crossed the threshold of their domain. Papa greeted them with a warm embrace, tears glinting in his eyes as he recognized the weight lifted from their shoulders. "You've proven your bond," he said quietly. "May your life together reflect the truth you've defended." They spent the day organizing a celebration for the ranch hands, a midday feast of fresh-caught trout, roasted venison, and the first new potatoes of the season. Laughter mingled with music as fiddles rose and hands clapped. Cordelia danced with Mrs. Morrison, and Magnolia watched from the porch, her expression a blend of contrition and awe. Nathaniel joined her by the hayloft, where they watched the cows calving in the neighboring fields. He wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her close. Now that Victoria's shadows have been banished, we can truly build our legacy. Together, she murmured, leaning against him as the ranch echoed with life's sturdy rhythms. Summer arrived in golden splendor, fields ripened with barley. The cattle's hide gleamed in midday sun, and the air was thick with wild rose and clover. Cordelia and Nathaniel embarked on the final chapter of their love story, planning their formal wedding, not merely a legal ceremony, but a joyful proclamation to the territory that their union was celebrated and unassailable. They invited friends, from Helena, Reverend Stewart, Bram, Sheriff Coleman, and esteemed guests from Cedar Ridge, Papa, Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Patterson, and a handful of townspeople whose transformation of heart marked the depth of their conviction. The ceremony was set beneath a maple grove on the ranch's highest ridge, where the horizon stretched in limitless green and gold. On the appointed day, Cordelia stood in a simple yet elegant white gown, her hair coiled into a braid adorned with wildflowers picked that morning. She held a bouquet of lily of the valley, wild rose and sage, symbols of purity, love's embrace and protection. Nathaniel waited beneath an arch of intertwined branches and rose vines, wearing a tailored riding suit with a waistcoat of deep forest green, colors that spoke of the land they cherished. The guests gathered beneath the canopy of maple leaves, dappled light dancing upon their faces. Reverend Stewart opened the service with a hymn, his voice resonant as summer's warmth. When he reached the moment of blessing, he turned to them with a gentle smile. Nathaniel and Cordelia, your marriage has already been affirmed by court and conscience. Today we celebrate it with joy and thanksgiving before God and these witnesses. As you walk life's winding path, may love always guide your steps. Nathaniel took Cordelia's hands in his steady gaze meeting hers. Cordelia Steele, I have known loneliness's harsh winter and heartbreak's feverish dream. But in you I found my spring, hope, companionship, and the promise of tomorrow. With this ring, I pledge my life, my land, and my heart to you, as your partner for all seasons. Cordelia's eyes shone with tears as she placed a simple gold band over his finger. Nathaniel Steele, you have taught me that love need not yield to convention, that mutual respect is the bedrock of devotion. With this ring, I pledge my unwavering faith, my labors, and my heart to you, forever your equal and your support. As they pressed the rings into place, an ecstatic cheer rose among the guests. They sealed their vows with a kiss that tasted of summer bloom and unspoken dreams. The celebration that followed stretched late into the summer night, a feast of prime roast beef, sweet corn on the cob, buttered zucchini, and sparkling cider in crystal goblets. Children danced barefoot in the meadow to the strains of Bram's fiddle, while the adults shared toasts beneath firefly-lit lanterns. Magnolia Fairweather, once Cordelia's greatest rival, approached in humility and held out a small wooden box. Inside lay a hand-embroidered handkerchief, its white linen edged with blue thread. Cordelia's name and wedding date were stitched in delicate script. I wish you both every happiness, Magnolia said, voice unsteady. I envy the courage you've shown. Thank you for teaching me a better way. Cordelia accepted the gift with grace. Thank you, Magnolia. May you find your own happiness in time. As the stars blazed in the summer sky, Nathaniel and Cordelia stood on a low knoll overlooking their wedding's jubilant festivities. The moon cast everything in a serene glow, highlighting the circle of guests below, their laughter echoing like hearthside warmth. Nathaniel draped Cordelia in his arms, his eyes slow with wonder. We've forged a path through winter's trials, legal storms, and society's judgments, and still here we stand, stronger for every challenge. She smiled up at him, their foreheads touching in an intimacy beyond words. Our story was never a quiet one. But it has been honest, daring, and full of love. I wouldn't have it any other way." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, the summer breeze carrying the faint scent of roses and freshly turned soil. "Then, let us walk forward, Cordelia Steele, partners in life, in love, and in every dawn yet to break." They turned together toward their jubilant guests, hands entwined, hearts unburdened by storms past. As their laughter mingled with the night's song, Montana's endless sky stretched above them, an open canvas for the love they had fought to claim and the legacy they would build together.